Okay, our last session of day is with Honorable Justice Fausto Martin de Sanctis. He will give us a presentation about COVID-19 and corruption in a bomb time in Brazil. It will be really very interesting presentation. We look forward to hear his presentation. But before it, I would like to give some information about Professor Fausto. Even though he looks very young, now you will see, he has really very long and full career. I would like to give you some information. He's current judge of the Brazil Appellate Court of Third Region. Previously, he was a Sao Paulo state judge between 19 and 91, and before he was public prosecutor of the municipality of Sao Paulo and the public prosecutor of the Sao Paulo. And he was also professor at Judge University for 12 years. At the head of the 6th Criminal Court in the Sao Paulo, he specialized in money laundering and financial crimes for 20 years. He judged in complex cases. He is also holding PhD in criminal law from Sao Paulo University. And he also has a lot of publications and presentations. Judge Fausto, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
And you?
Okay. Before you start your presentation, we would like to hear some information about how is going on daily life in Brazil. As we know, Brazil is the second largest case numbers in COVID-19 all around the world. And I also wonder one more thing, that your title is Appeal Judge for the Third Region. How many regions you have in Brazil, or what does the region mean? Is it there are numerous regions, or what does it mean? And the last one, you have a special human rights or constitutional courts, or how you receive the human rights complaints, and how do you receive it, and how do you decide about it? Thank you very much. You have 1 hour, and then we have about 50 minutes for questions and answers. Microphone is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like, first of all, to congratulate the Istanbul University and also Leiden University, because Pina also, she invited me for this event with Adam. So I'd like to thank both of them for this. It's a pleasure to be again at the Istanbul International Summer School, my first time summer school event at this university. So, in fact, I went to Istanbul University for 2 years, Adam. Not only 2 years ago, but last year also I went to Istanbul. I was very well hosted by you and the university. Thank you very much. So, going through your questions, Serhat, first, I'd like to thank you also. I know you are a very young judge. I can see you are very young, and I know that you are rapporteur of the Constitutional Court in Turkey, very prestigious position. So thank you. It's an honor to me to have this event with your moderation. Thank you. So in Brazil, we have 5 regions, court regions. What does it mean? Each region means a group of states. So the third region, which one I belong to, embrace both states, states of São Paulo and another state close to São Paulo, Mato Grosso do Sul. That's the name of the state. So as São Paulo has the majority of the federal cases, we have one region for both states, only both states, but another 4 courts, federal courts, different regions, have different groups of states. So we have 5 now. for now. But you know, yesterday Congress, Brazilian Congress, was trying to create a sixth federal court in a new region, the sixth region of this. So dealing with human rights, we have all the courts, federal courts to do this. We don't have a specialized court in human rights, but you have civil courts that can deal with this, and you don't have specific courts for that. We have in Brazil 2 superior courts. One of the courts are constitutional courts and the appeal court. The Supreme Court, our Brazilian Supreme Court, it's appeal court too. So you don't have a specific court for human rights, but you have cases involving, of course, human rights and trying to deal with this very sensitive, important issue. So I'd like to start my presentation now. The presentation is about Brazil, COVID-19 and corruption. It's important to mention both sides of the issue because besides you have this sad situation, Brazil is the second in terms of numbers and figures of COVID-19. São Paulo is the hub of COVID-19 because it's the biggest, in terms of population, the biggest state of Brazil. So because of that, and because of you have international airports, COVID-19 came from Europe. It started from an Italian. The Italian person came to São Paulo and then spread out the COVID-19. Firstly in São Paulo and then the rest of Brazil, and then now it hits very strongly in the countryside. It's more than São Paulo. São Paulo is now in a, we say in a plateau, the French word, is stabilized, stable now, the numbers. It's still high, but stable. It's starting to dropping the numbers of infected people and deaf people and deaths. So we starting to see a better time from now, but still bad, still bad. My presentation will start, I made a summary, I will make a little introduction. I talk about public engagement, court technology, criminal justice system, health emergency laws, you have more than 1 hour per law, corruption, conclusion. So you can see now in the background, the map of Brazil. We see here, I don't know, can you see my cursor? You see here São Paulo, where you have more cases of COVID. Can you see São Paulo? São Paulo is here. Here is Rio de Janeiro. And then we have a lot of numbers in Amazon. It's unbelievable. In the middle of Amazon, you have the Amazon forest. Where is my course? The Amazon forest is over here and here, but the capital of the state of Amazon, this is the state of Amazon. You have a lot of numbers affected people by COVID in the middle of the forest. And we don't know why, but now the numbers are much better than São Paulo in the Amazon region. We say region because we have 2 states that embrace the Amazon forest and the cities around the forest. So the judiciary of Brazil has responded to the challenges and the chaos wrought by the new coronavirus, COVID-19, with important efforts to provide essential court service while protecting the safety of judges, court personnel, litigants, and the public. The judiciary is undergoing a cultural and behavioral change in the post-pandemic period. The courts have successfully embraced remote work and the use of video conferencing to carry out court cases. The judicial system's use of technology is setting an example of professionalism and productivity. These efforts and methods vary depending upon local capacity and resources. High Court's weekly or bi-weekly sessions are conducted virtually, as are proceedings in many of the country's lower federal courts. In contrast, the majority of hearings in Brazil's less technologically equipped regional courts have been postponed, as are being postponed jury trials. I watched the previous presentation with Edward Johnson, very interesting presentation. He was talking about jury trials. Jury trials in Brazil are being postponed because we consider very important to make this physically, because of what he said. It's important to see the movement, the behavior of the defendant, the witness, by the jurors. So because of it, we don't do a virtual trial in jury trials. So, talking about public engagement, there are no easy solutions for preserving normalcy given the scale of the pandemic in Brazil. Nations around the world hope for the arrival of a vaccine that will protect their citizens from COVID-19. But there is keen awareness that this is not be possible in the short term, very short term. The pandemic and the increase in social and economic needs that it has created have contributed to political instability, great anxiety among citizens, and growing distrust of political officials. But the judiciary must work to live up to the needs and the expectations of the public. The National Council of Justice, CNG, response is being coordinated with open public dialogue to be responsive to the community's needs and interests. Justice sector policy must evolve in close collaboration between the authorities and the affected populations. It must also avoid conflicts between politics and medical science. We saw in Brazil a big conflict between some politicians and science people. And for God's sake, we had the local authorities who was following the guidelines of the World Health Organization. That's why we are making isolation, population are being isolated, and we respect the quarantine and all the rules of WHO, World Health Organization. The Brazilian judiciary has been called on and has responded despite this peculiar situation that the country is facing. Court technology. The National Council of Justice has provided a secure digital platform for all courts in the country to hold hearings and trial sessions by video conference. The emergency video conferencing platform for procedural acts authorized judges to expand their work while the COVID-19 pandemic has made face-to-face work unfeasible. The project stemmed from a technical cooperation agreement signed with Cisco Brazil and did not impose any costs or financial commitments on the CNG, the National Council of Justice. The duration of the agreement will parallel the special period caused by the pandemic. This video conferencing tool has allowed the creation of virtual courtrooms by magistrates to hold judgment sessions, hearings, and meetings. It also enables them to engage with all of the actors in the judicial system, including public and private lawyers or defenders, members of prosecution, judges, court staff, If necessary, technical support in virtual and live mode is also be possible. This technology enabled the first CNG section to be held by video conference on March 31st, an example of early efforts to respect the social distancing. Talking about a specific criminal justice system, the Department of Monitoring and Inspection of the Prison System and the System for the Execution of Social Educational Measures of the National Council of Justice has been investing in technology to consolidate initiatives already underway and to prepare new strategies. Under CNG Recommendation 62, courts have been required to report bi-weekly to the CNG about local pandemic conditions. A new reform initiative has authorized online meetings and the remote activities. Technology is supporting the dissemination of knowledge with the support of local teams. The guidelines address electronic monitoring and the alternatives to incarceration in accordance with new guidelines issued by CNG. What is interesting in Brazil is looking the figures, the data that were compiled showing that the risk of the prison population being affected by COVID-19, this risk is less than that of the general population. So in a consultation carried out yesterday, I did it yesterday, on the website of the National Penitentiary Department, the Brazilian Penitentiary Department, the PEN, the name of the department, it observed that the prison population amounts in Brazil to 748,000, more than 748,000 prisoners, of which more than 18,000 were infected. That represents 2.42% of them, and 98 died, 0.01% died of the population, prison population. This date, this number indicates that the amount, I told you this. On the other hand, according to data compiled, the Brazilian population is more than 210 million people, of which more than 3,600,000 people were infected. That represents 1.72% of the general population, and 115,000, more than 115,000 died of COVID, which represents 0.05% of the population. So these figures indicates that the probability of someone in Brazil dying from COVID-19 is almost 5 times greater than that of the population in the prison system. This is very important because many appeals in federal system is asking for being released. The prisoners are asking for being released because of the COVID-19. But it's only possible when you recognize the risk population of the prisoners. So the National Penitentiary Department, the PEN, suspended visits to prison units. So isolation is being respected according to the recommendation of the World Health Organization. Emergency laws in Brazil. With a new health emergency law was enacted in February to address emergency situations like COVID-19. And the new law set forth rules addressing quarantine, mandatory testing, and medical care, and also established a process for authorizing the importation of pharmaceuticals products. The law also sets guidelines for procurement of goods, services, and health supplies needed for crisis, but did not anticipate unlawful manipulation of this market. Although there was a provision requiring coordination of infection data between federal and state public administration bodies, there are no provisions about sharing account information on the movement, payment, and destination of public resources. The law edited by the President Bolsonaro brought important innovations to be adopted in the current state of public calamity. For instance, the increase in the bid waiver amounts that deal with items 1 and 2 of Article 24 of the bidding law, Brazilian bidding law, the advance payment in bids and contracts by the administration and the application of the differentiated public procurement regime for bids and contracts. Regarding the waiver of bidding, the law significantly raised the legal limits previously provided, both for the contracting of engineering works and service, and for the contracting of other services and purchases. The increase in such values gave greater mobility to public managers to carry out, especially in the face of the notorious difficulties imposed by the pandemic, hiring essential services to public administration. The law referred to the possibility of prepayment in bids and contracts with the public administration in case of indispensable conditions to obtain the good, the item, and its significant resource savings factor. The term significant gives rise to interpretations under courts. The default is no longer an element, on the other hand, in the pricing equation for contracted services. The law also allowed differentiated public procurement regime for bids and contracts. That is, bidding can be carried out electronically only. On the other hand, the law determined that officials can only be held responsible in the civil and the administrative spheres in the case of action or omission with intent or gross error in the adoption of measures to face the pandemic, to combat the economic effects resulting from it. It removed the responsibility of the manager when adopting technical opinion as the basis for his decision, except in cases where the intent or gross error in its use is proven, or in the case of collusion among officials. It expressly stated that the mere causal linking between the manager's conduct and the harmful result does not imply responsibility. Finally, it clarified that the gross error is that manifest, evident, and irrefutable one committed with serious guilt, and determined that in its assessment, the real difficulties faced by the official must be considered. The complexity of the matter, the incompleteness of information, urgent and emergency situations, and the context of uncertainty created by the pandemic. There have been, talking about corruption, there have been abuses in the tender process. We saw this in Brazil, including questionable bidding and in the embezzlement of public funds. Law enforcement bodies are struggling to investigate large scale of fraud and other economic crimes, while the pandemic's acceleration is spread throughout Brazil. Concerning about corruption during this pandemic, the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, published a document entitled FATF COVID-19 Related Money Laundering and Terrorist Financial Risks and the Policy Responses, in which it identifies challenges, good practices, and political responses to new threats, as well as the vulnerabilities of money laundering and terrorist financing arising specifically from the coronavirus crisis. It mentions, for instance, the fact that the economic crisis resulting from COVID-19 led to an increase in financial scams, such as promotions in which they falsely stated that products or services of a publicly traded company can prevent, detect, or cure COVID-19. Shares normally issued by smaller companies could be particularly vulnerable to fraudulent investment schemes, as they were low-priced stocks with limited publicly available information. And finally, many governments have started to provide stimulus aid to mitigate the economic impact related to COVID-19. For instance, in Brazil, the so-called emergency aid, initially in force for 3 months, was extended for another 4 months. Criminals have tried to claim them fraudulently or misdirected them. Corruption in the channels of supply or aid delivery can impact international financial assistance. In Brazil, we have several arrests already and seizures determined by the judiciary for embezzlement of public money by authorities, notably governors. Government contracts to buy large quantity of medical supplies or run field hospitals do offer opportunities for corruption and the misappropriation of public funds. This activity may become more prevalent if there is a perception that financial supervision of government, procurement, and spending is decreasing. Aimed at contaminated people and the deaths result from the pandemic of the new coronavirus, which has already killed thousands of Brazilians. The value of contracts investigated by the Brazil federal and state police reached almost 1.5 billion reais, the Brazilian currency. That means about 300 million US dollars of fraud in purchases and contracts signed to face the disease. There are investigations in the states of Rio de Janeiro and Pará states. I show you where are the states. Rio de Janeiro is here, the state is a small state, Rio de Janeiro is here, and the Pará state is this one. For instance, in May 26, the governor of Rio de Janeiro joined the list of Rio chief executives to appear in investigations by the federal police. The police officers carried out a search and seizure warrant against the governor at the Laranjeiras Palace, the official residence of the Rio's governor. The operation of the federal police carried out search and seizure warrants at 12 addresses in Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo states. The suspicion of the federal police involves embezzlement of funds for the construction of field hospitals in Rio de Janeiro to assist patients infected with the coronavirus with severe symptoms of COVID-19. The orders were issued by the Superior Court of Justice in Brasília, the capital of Brazil, due to evidence that pointed out for the existence of a corruption scheme involving a social organization contracted for the installation of build the hospital, and civil servants of the health system of the state of Rio de Janeiro. Another case, on June 10, the federal police carried out search and seizure warrants, part of an operation due to an investigation of fraud in the purchase of pulmonary ventilators by the governor of Pará state to combat the new coronavirus. The governor is one of the targets of the operation. The purchase of 400 ventilators cost $10 million to the coffers of Pará state. Half of the amount was paid in advance, according to this law that I mentioned before. In addition to presenting problems, the equipment was not the one that was ordered and proved unsuitable for the treatment of COVID. Can you imagine that the ventilator was purchased by the government and it was not suitable for the treatment of COVID-19? According to the federal prosecution, there are indications that the governor has a close relationship with the owner of the company that supplied the device, and that he knew that ventilators were not suitable for the treatment of COVID-19. Acquisitions without prior notice must be made only in extreme situations. Everything needs to be justified. It's not because there is a possibility to dispense bidding that this should be done. The exemption should only occur if absolutely necessary. In case of urgency, in which by usual means it's not possible to implement a certain public policy in a timely manner. There are many governments that think it's a license to do it anyway. Going to the conclusion, I can say that facing the pandemic crisis, Brazil judicial system is making use of technology to maintain productivity, and the judges are hard at work to adjudicate a series of complex corruption cases. During the COVID pandemic, Brazil's courts are open to the public, but in a different way. Although full physical reopening is not expected until the end of 2020, the judiciary is committed to address the myriad of new and unexpected challenges. So that's what I'd like to tell about the situation in Brazil. You are still facing a hard time. We have many cities in isolation, but now the commerce and the activity, economic activity start to be opened. I have to say something, Serhat, that you know, Brazil, we live with hot time almost the whole year. For 4 months, we stayed at home during all this time, although we had in some cities 40 degrees, 35 degrees Celsius, hot, very hot, and the empty beaches everywhere, empty parks, and they could not stand anymore to be at home for more than 4 and 5 months. That's why the government, I'm not talking about the federal government, because the federal governor has a particular view of the pandemic. I know that probably you know in Turkey about our president. He thinks that the coronavirus is not so dangerous. It's like a flu, and but it's not. In fact, it's not. But the local government, they are aware of this terrible situation, and it was possible to follow the isolation for a long time. But now, little by little, the cities are being opened, the activities are being opened, and of course, it's mandatory to use, according to the law, to use masks and protecting from COVID-19. So I thank you for this opportunity, and I'm available for the questions that I'm sure that it's coming from your side. Thank you very much.